Imagine the shock of seeing a grown woman shove a 9-year-old disabled child into a swimming pool, sneering, "This area isn't meant for people like that." That's the nightmare I lived when Margot Blackwell targeted my daughter, Zoe. But Margot didn't stop at pushing my little girl into the water. She had the gall to claim problem children like Zoe would tank property values, clueless that I'm the one who enforces anti-discrimination laws across the country. What kind of reckoning do you think Margot had coming? Let me take you through the fiery unraveling of this story. I'm Taylor Rodriguez, and this is what happens when you mess with the wrong family. The July heat in Northern Virginia was suffocating. That afternoon, just 3 weeks after we'd settled into Cypress Grove Estates, my recent promotion to Enforcement Director in the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice had brought us closer to Washington, D.C., and I'd chosen this community for its accessibility and top-notch aquatic center, vital for Zoe's physical therapy. "Daddy, will the pool be packed?" Zoe asked, her small hands carefully fastening her leg braces. At 9, she'd already become a pro at managing the custom orthotics that supported her legs. "Probably," I said, helping with the final strap. "It's the grand opening celebration, but Dr. Chen says swimming is the best therapy for your muscles, so we're going either way." Zoe gave a determined nod. Diagnosed with mild cerebral palsy as a toddler, her lower body mobility was limited, and she relied on forearm crutches for balance. But in the water, she soared with a freedom the ground couldn't offer, which is why the Olympic-sized pool here sealed the deal for us. "I made a new playlist," she chirped, waving her waterproof music player. "It's all Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish." Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you have any confrontation. With the HOA, we will narrate your story on our channel. I smiled at my daughter's eclectic taste. Despite the challenges she faced daily, Zoe maintained an irrepressible spirit. Her dark curls framed a face that was quick to smile, and her eyes, so like her mother's before cancer took her from us 3 years ago, sparkled with intelligence and determination. "Perfect pool music," I agreed, grabbing our towels. "Ready for your grand debut at Cypress Grove?" She grinned, pushing herself up with practiced ease. "Ready?" The walk to the community center was short but deliberate. Zoe insisted on using her crutches rather than her wheelchair. Determined to build her strength, I matched my pace to hers, scanning our new neighborhood as we went. Cypress Grove Estates was exactly what the brochures promised. Immaculate landscaping, Mediterranean-inspired architecture, and an atmosphere of exclusive luxury. The home started at 7 figures with HOA fees to match. The recently completed aquatic center stood at the community's heart, a gleaming structure of glass and stone housing both indoor and outdoor pools, a fitness center, and spa facilities. Today's grand opening celebration had been advertised as the social event of the season, with the HOA sparing no expense on catering, music, and festivities. As we approached, I could see residents in summer finery milling about the entrance, champagne flutes in hand. Many turned to look as Zoe navigated the pathway with her crutches, their expressions ranging from polite smiles to uncomfortable avoidance to outright stares. I felt the familiar protective instinct rising, but kept my expression neutral. Zoe had repeatedly told me she didn't want me, going lawyer mode on everyone who looked at her twice. "Mr. Rodriguez," a friendly voice called out. Rebecca Washington, our next-door neighbor, waved from near the entrance. A retired civil rights attorney herself, Rebecca had been the first to welcome us to the neighborhood with homemade empanadas and insider knowledge about the community. "Rebecca, good to see you," I greeted as we reached her. "This is quite the event. Cypress Grove never does anything by half," she agreed before smiling. "Down at Zoe, and you must be the famous Zoe. Your dad talks about you all the time." Zoe beamed. "Did he tell you I'm going to be a Paralympic swimmer someday?" He did, and I believe it, Rebecca replied with genuine warmth. I was a competitive swimmer in college. Maybe I could give you some tips sometime. Yes, please. Zoe's enthusiasm bubbled over. As we chatted, I noticed a woman watching us intently from near the pool entrance. She was perhaps in her early 50s, expensively dressed in a designer sundress with a name badge indicating she was part of the HOA committee. Her expertly highlighted blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression suggested she had just detected an unpleasant odor. Rebecca followed my gaze and lowered her voice. That's Margot Blackwell, Amenities Committee Chair and self-appointed Queen of Cypress Grove. Watch yourself. She considers the new aquatic centre her personal kingdom. I nodded my thanks for the warning as we made our way inside. The facility was even more impressive than the virtual tour had shown. Sparkling azure waters, state-of-the-art equipment, and panoramic windows offering views of the meticulously landscaped grounds. Daddy, look. Zoe pointed excitedly to the indoor therapy pool, which was equipped with a hydraulic lift and graduated entry ramp. Can we try that one after I swim some laps? Absolutely, I promised, guiding her toward the locker rooms. Let's get changed first. 20 minutes later, Zoe emerged in her favorite purple swimsuit and swim cap, navigating carefully on her crutches across the slightly damp tile. I carried our towels and her backup mobility aids, having learned long ago to be prepared for all contingencies. The outdoor Olympic pool was crowded but not unmanageable. I found us 2 lounge chairs at the less populated end and helped Zoe arrange her things. Her specialized waterproof crutches would allow her to enter and exit the pool independently, a freedom she treasured. Remember what Dr. Chen said, I reminded her as she prepared to enter the water. Start with gentle stretches in the shallow end before swimming laps. I know, Dad, she replied, with the good-natured exasperation of a child who has heard the same instructions 1,000 times. Stretches first, then freestyle, then backstroke. I watched proudly as she made her way toward the pool steps, moving with careful determination. Several children nearby watched curiously, but none approached. Adults, as usual, performed the dance of studied nonchalance, pretending not to notice while being hyper-aware of her presence. Zoe had just reached the pool edge when a sharp voice cut through the ambient chatter. "Excuse me, those are not permitted in the pool area." Margot Blackwell strode toward us, designer heels clicking authoritatively on the pool deck. One manicured, finger pointing directly at Zoe's crutches. I stepped forward. "They're specialized waterproof mobility aids," I explained calmly. "They're designed specifically for aquatic environments." Margot's lips thinned. "I don't care what they're designed for. The rules clearly state no outside equipment in the pool area." She gestured to a sign listing various prohibited items like food, glass containers, and inflatable toys. "These aren't equipment," I countered. "They're medical mobility devices which are exempt from those restrictions under the Americans with Disabilities Act." Zoe stood frozen at the pool's edge, her excitement fading as she became the center of unwanted attention. Nearby conversations hushed as people turned to watch the confrontation. "The ADA doesn't supersede our HOA health and safety regulations," Margot stated with absolute but misplaced confidence. "Those things could damage the pool surface or pose a hazard to other swimmers. They're made of specialized non-marking materials, specifically to prevent any such issues," I explained, struggling to maintain my professional tone. "We have documentation from Zoe's physical therapist approving them for pool use, which we submitted to the HOA office last week and received approval." Margot's expression flickered briefly. Clearly, she hadn't been informed of this approval, but rather than back down, she doubled down. That approval would have had to come through my committee, and I didn't approve anything. She crossed her arms. As amenities chair, I have final say on what's allowed in our facilities. By now, Zoe had begun to back away from the pool edge, her face flushing with embarrassment as more residents gathered to watch the scene unfold. My heart ached, seeing her joy evaporate, replaced by the self-consciousness she worked so hard to overcome. "Zoe," I called gently, "go ahead and get in the pool. Your crutches are approved. Medical devices." She hesitated, looking uncertainly between me and Margot. "Young lady," Margot said, turning her attention directly to Zoe, "this is a brand new multi-million-dollar facility. We can't have it damaged by improper equipment." Her voice took on a condescending sweetness. "Perhaps your father could help you into the water without those. Or maybe the therapy pool would be more appropriate for your situation. The therapy pool, located indoors away from the main social area, essentially segregated from the normal swimmers." I felt my professional composure beginning to crack. My daughter has every right to use this pool with her necessary mobility aids. I stated, my voice taking on the edge I typically reserved for courtroom arguments. The Fair Housing Act and ADA both protect that right, explicitly. Margot's face hardened. "I'm trying to be reasonable here, but you're being difficult. The fact is, accommodations like these need to be scheduled in advance. We can't have people bringing medical devices into common areas whenever they please. It disrupts the experience for regular residents." The phrase "regular residents" hung in the air like a thunderclap. Several onlookers shifted uncomfortably. Rebecca Washington had appeared at my side, her phone discreetly held at an angle that suggested she was recording the interaction. "Margot," she interjected calmly, "I believe you're overstepping your authority here." "Stay out of this, Rebecca," Margot snapped. "The Amenities Committee has full discretion over pool usage policies." During this exchange, Zoe had continued her careful approach to the water, determined not to let the confrontation deter her therapy session. She reached the top step of the pool entry, her crutches positioned to help her descend safely into the water. Margot noticed this and moved with surprising quickness for someone in foreign heels. "I said those are not allowed," she exclaimed, reaching for one of Zoe's crutches. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion as Margot grabbed at the crutch. Zoe instinctively tried to maintain her balance, twisting away. The sudden movement on the wet pool deck caused her to lose her footing. Margot, still pulling at the crutch, effectively pushed Zoe off balance. With a small cry of surprise, Zoe tumbled sideways into the pool, her crutches clattering onto the deck. The splash sent water across nearby loungers, eliciting gasps from onlookers. I was in the water in an instant, my heart hammering. Though Zoe was a strong swimmer, the shock of an unexpected fall could disorient anyone. I reached her just as she surfaced, coughing and pushing wet hair from her eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked, helping stabilize her in the water. She nodded, though her lower lip trembled slightly. "I'm okay," she whispered, but the quaver in her voice told a different story. The public humiliation was worse than any physical discomfort. As I helped Zoe to the pool's edge, I heard Margot's voice pitched to carry. "This is exactly why we need stricter rules. See what happens when we allow improper equipment." She could have been seriously injured. The audacity of her statement, blaming Zoe for a fall that Margot herself had caused, sent a surge of white-hot anger through me. I took a deep breath, knowing that losing my temper would only make the situation worse for Zoe. I lifted my daughter from the pool and set her gently on a nearby chair, wrapping a towel around her shoulders. Her eyes were downcast, avoiding the stares of other residents. "It's not your fault," I told her quietly. "Not one bit." Then I turned to face Margot, who stood with Zoe's crutches in her hands, holding them away from her body as if they were contaminated. "Give me my daughter's medical devices," I said, my voice level, but carrying an unmistakable edge. Margot held her ground. "These will need to be properly sanitized before they can be returned to the pool area if they're permitted."
At all. "I'll need to consult with the board." Several voices rose in protest. Now, not all residents of Cypress Grove were willing to silently witness such treatment. "That's enough, Margot," an older gentleman called from a nearby table. "Give the girl."
"Back your crutches. This isn't your concern, Harold," Margot replied sharply. "As paying members of this association, we all have a stake in maintaining certain standards. Special accommodations like these should be arranged privately, not imposed on community spaces. It affects everyone's property values when we start looking like some kind of rehabilitation facility." A collective intake of breath followed this statement. Even those who might have privately harbored similar thoughts recognized the cruelty of expressing them so openly. Rebecca stepped forward, phone still recording. "I believe I have everything I need," she said quietly. "Taylor, do you want me to send you this recording?" "Yes, please," I replied, still focused on retrieving Zoe's mobility aids. Margot's eyes narrowed as she registered the phone. "Recording without consent is against HOA rules," she declared. "Delete that immediately." "Actually," Rebecca replied calmly, "the pool area is considered a public space within the community, and there's no expectation of privacy, but I'm happy to submit this as evidence to the board regarding your conduct today." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Margot's face, but she recovered quickly. "This family is in violation of clearly posted rules. I was simply enforcing them, as is my responsibility. If anyone should be reported to the board, it's them." I stepped closer to Margot, my professional experience taking over. I knew exactly how to handle people who believed their authority was absolute. "Ms. Blackwell," I said, my voice now carrying the precise, measured tone I used in legal proceedings. "You have physically assaulted a disabled minor, denied her use of medically necessary mobility devices, and made discriminatory statements regarding disabilities and accommodation, all of which violates federal civil rights law. I am formally requesting the return of my daughter's property and will be addressing this incident through appropriate channels." Something in my tone must have finally penetrated Margot's self-righteousness. She thrust the crutches toward me with a huff. "This isn't over," she warned. "The board will be hearing about this disruptive behavior." "I'm counting on it," I replied evenly. As Margot stormed away, several residents approached to offer support. "That was outrageous," said a woman who introduced herself as Helen. "My grandson uses hearing aids, and I can't imagine someone treating him that way." "Margot's been getting worse since they made her amenities chair," added another resident. Power trip doesn't begin to describe it. I thanked them for their concern, but focused on Zoe, who sat quietly wrapped in her towel. "Do you want to stay, or should we head home?" I asked her. She considered the question with the seriousness that always surprised people who underestimated her. "If we leave now, she wins," Zoe finally said. "I still need to do my therapy exercises." Pride swelled in my chest at my daughter's resilience. "Then let's do your exercises. Different pool, though." We moved to the indoor therapy pool, which was blessedly empty. As Zoe began her stretches in the water, I sent a short email to my office requesting certain public record searches. Then I called Dr. James Chenzo's physical therapist. "James, we had an incident at the pool today." I explained, detailing what had occurred. "Would you be available for an HOA meeting later this week? I think your medical expertise might be needed." Absolutely, he replied without hesitation. I'll bring all of Zoe's documentation and research on aquatic therapy benefits. Just tell me, when and where? Yen, by the time we left the aquatic center, Rebecca had sent me the video of the entire encounter along with contact information for 3 other witnesses willing to provide statements. Let us know where you're watching from today, and if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, just 3 days after the incident. The official agenda listed discussion of pool usage policies and safety regulations. But the community grapevine had spread the real story. The clubhouse meeting room was packed to capacity. Zoe had asked to attend, insisting she wanted to see the
resolution firsthand. "It's my fight too, Dad," she'd said with such conviction that I couldn't refuse. Dr. Chen met us outside, professional, in a crisp suit and carrying a thick folder of documentation. Rebecca arrived moments later, followed by 2 colleagues from the
Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, who had offered to attend in support off the record. Of course, inside the board, members sat at a long table at the front of the room. Margot occupied a seat slightly apart, representing the Amenities Committee rather than the board itself. She palled visibly when she spotted Dr. Chen and my colleagues, clearly recognizing that this wasn't going to be the simple disciplinary hearing she had anticipated. The board president, Thomas Hargrove, called the meeting to order promptly at 7 p.m. "Good evening, everyone," he began, surveying the unusually full room. "We've called this emergency session to address concerns raised about our new aquatic center policies, particularly regarding accessibility equipment and accommodations." Margot immediately raised her hand. "If I may, President Hargrove, I've prepared a presentation on the safety protocols we should implement for specialized equipment, including designated hours for therapeutic use." My jaw clenched at the audacity after physically pushing my child into the pool. She was proposing segregated swimming hours. Thomas nodded. "We'll get to your recommendations, Margot, but first, we've received a formal complaint regarding an incident on Monday that I believe should be addressed." He turned to me. "Mr. Rodriguez has requested time to speak. The floor is yours, sir." I stood, nodding, thanks to Thomas. "Good evening. For those I haven't yet met, I'm Taylor Rodriguez. My daughter Zoe and I moved to Cypress Grove last month." I gestured to where Zoe sat proudly beside Dr. Chen. "I'd like to address what happened at the pool opening on Monday afternoon and discuss some serious legal concerns raised by that incident." Margot interjected. "If this is about the rule enforcement issue, I was simply Mrs. Blackwell." Thomas interrupted firmly. "Mr. Rodriguez has the floor. Please hold your comments." I thanked him and continued. "On Monday, my daughter was physically pushed into the pool by Mrs. Blackwell while attempting to use her medically necessary mobility aids, specialized waterproof crutches designed specifically for aquatic environments. Prior to that, she was told that her presence as a disabled individual would lower property values and that she should use segregated facilities rather than the main pool." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Margot sat up straighter, indignation evident in her posture. "These actions and statements constitute clear violations of multiple federal laws," I continued. "What Mrs. Blackwell may not have known when she decided to discriminate against my daughter is that I serve as the enforcement director for the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice." The room went utterly silent. Margot's face drained of color. "In my professional capacity," I explained, "I oversee federal enforcement of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act, and other civil rights statutes across the country. I spend my days investigating and litigating precisely this type of discrimination." I reached into my briefcase and removed a folder. I've prepared a brief outlining the specific violations that occurred on Monday, including physical assault of a disabled minor, denial of reasonable accommodation, discriminatory statements, and attempted segregation of facilities based on disability status. I distributed copies to each board member before continuing. Rebecca Washington captured the
incident on video, which I've submitted to the board.
With your permission, I'd like to play it for the community now, as I believe transparency is essential in addressing discrimination. Thomas looked to his fellow board members, who nodded agreement. "Proceed," he said. The video played on the large screen at the front of the room. The footage was even clearer than I remembered capturing Margot's dismissive tone, her insistence that Zoe use separate facilities, her statement about regular residence and property values, and finally, the physical altercation that sent Zoe into the water. When it ended, the room remained silent for several heartbeats before erupting an outraged conversation. Thomas had to rap his gavel several times to restore order. Additionally, I continued, once quiet, returned. Dr. James Chenzo's physical therapist is here to address any medical questions regarding her mobility aids and the therapeutic necessity of swimming for her condition. Dr. Chen stood, introducing himself and his credentials before explaining the specialized nature of Zoe's equipment and how aquatic therapy was a critical component of her treatment plan. These devices pose no hazard to pool infrastructure or other swimmers, he concluded. In fact, they're used in professional aquatic facilities worldwide, specifically because they're designed for such environments. Throughout these presentations, Margot sat rigid in her chair, her expression alternating between defiance and dawning realization of the severity of her actions. When Dr. Chen finished, Thomas turned to her. "Mrs. Blackwell, would you like to respond to these allegations?" Margot stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "I was simply enforcing our community standards for pool safety." Perhaps I was overzealous in my approach, but my intentions were to protect our facilities and residents. "Your intentions don't matter under the law," I interjected calmly. "Your actions constitute textbook discrimination regardless of what motivated them." "I didn't know about her condition," Margot protested. "How was I supposed to know those were medical devices and not just some sort of equipment?" "You were told explicitly," Rebecca called from her seat. "It's on the video. Taylor explained they were medically necessary mobility aids, and you dismissed that explanation. Furthermore," I added, "the HOA office had already approved Zoe's use of these devices. You chose to override that approval, based
on your personal discomfort with her disability." Margot looked desperately toward the board. "This is being blown out of proportion. I acknowledge I could have handled things more diplomatically, but you pushed a child into a pool," came a voice from the back of the room. "A disabled child. There's no diplomatic way to do that." More voices joined in the community's outrage building. Thomas had to use his gavel again to restore order. "What exactly are you seeking here, Mr. Rodriguez?" he asked. Once quiet returned. "I think we all agree the situation was grossly mishandled." I appreciated his directness. "I'm seeking 3 things. First, immediate revision of HOA policies to explicitly ensure compliance with the ADA and FHA, including reasonable accommodations for disabilities. Second, removal of Mrs. Blackwell from the Amenities Committee given her demonstrated discrimination and unsafe enforcement practices. And third, a community commitment to accessibility training for all HOA committee members." But I paused before adding, "What I'm not seeking is federal enforcement action or personal litigation, though both would be well supported by the evidence. I'd prefer to resolve this at the community level, assuming appropriate remedial action is taken." The implied threat was clear but measured. I wasn't looking to destroy the HOA or Margot personally, but I would use the full force of federal law if necessary. Thomas conferred briefly with the other board members before addressing the room again.
The board would like to propose the following actions. First, we will immediately establish a task force to review and revise all HOA policies for compliance with federal accessibility laws. Second, we will accept Mrs. Blackwell's resignation from the Amenities Committee effective immediately. He looked pointedly at Margot, who appeared to be fighting back tears. And third, we will implement mandatory training for all committee members on disability rights and accommodations. He turned to me. Would these actions satisfy your concerns, Mr. Rodriguez? They would, I confirmed. I'd also request that the board issue a formal apology to my daughter. Thomas nodded without hesitation. Of course, on behalf of the entire Cypress Grove Estates Homeowners Association, I apologized to Zoe for the treatment she received. It was unacceptable and does not reflect the community we aspire to be. He then addressed Margot directly. Mrs. Blackwell, do you have anything to add? All eyes turned to Margot, whose carefully maintained facade had crumbled entirely. She looked around the room, seeming to register for the first time the unified disapproval of her neighbors. She began, voice faltering. I was wrong. My behavior was inexcusable. She turned toward Zoe, who sat watching the proceedings with remarkable composure for a 9-year-old. Zoe, I am truly sorry for how I treated you. There's no excuse for my actions. The apology seemed genuine, if forced by circumstances. Zoe, showing more grace than anyone might expect, nodded her acceptance. The meeting concluded with a vote on the proposed actions which passed unanimously. As residents began to disperse, many approached Zoe and me with words of support and welcome. Margot slipped out quietly through a side door, her position of authority and social standing in the community irreparably damaged. Rebecca joined us as we prepared to leave. Justice served, she remarked with satisfaction. Though I have to say I'm a little disappointed we won't get to see the full might of the DOJ descend on our little HOA. I smiled. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about education and change.
Very diplomatic, she replied with a knowing look. But between us, you had quite the federal case ready to go, didn't you? Let's just say my colleagues were very interested in this particular pattern of discrimination, I admitted. But I meant
what I said. I'd rather see the community improve than tear it apart. As we walked home in the soft evening light, Zoe was unusually quiet, processing the events of the meeting. What are you thinking? I asked finally. She considered for a moment, her face serious. I'm thinking about Margot. This surprised me. What about her? She looked really sad at the end, Zoe observed. Not just because she got in trouble, but like she finally understood what she did wrong. Leave it to my daughter to find empathy even for someone who had hurt her. That's very perceptive, I told her. Sometimes people do wrong things because they don't understand the impact of their actions. Do you think she'll learn? Zoe asked. I hope so, I replied honestly. That's why we fought this way, instead of just punishing her. Zoe nodded thoughtfully. Dad, can I ask for something? Anything? When they make that task force for changing the rules, can I be on it? Her eyes shone with determination. I want to help make things better for other kids like me. My throat tightened with pride. I think that's a brilliant idea. We'll propose it at the next meeting. 2 weeks later, the newly formed Accessibility and Inclusion Committee held its first meeting with Zoe, serving as its youngest member. The former therapy pool was renamed the Adaptive Aquatic Center and equipped with additional accessibility features. Margot Blackwell began volunteering at a local center for children with disabilities as part of her personal atonement. And on warm summer evenings you can find Zoe at the community pool, moving through the water with graceful determination, her specialized crutches standing ready at the pool's edge, a visible reminder that Cypress Grove Estates belongs to everyone who calls it home. Sometimes justice comes through courtroom battles and federal investigations, but sometimes it comes through community awakening and a 9-year-old girl brave enough to stand her ground. As for Margot, last I heard, she's become an unexpected advocate for accessibility in real estate development. Sometimes the most powerful teachers are our most profound mistakes.